Kyler Murray, he's shown flashes. Is this going to be his breakout year or the year that he finally gets broken in half? Cards made a lot of offseason additions, but are now one of the oldest teams in the league. Does that wisdom and experience propel them to the playoffs, or do tired legs sink them when it matters most? Kliff Kingsbury, he's on the hot seat. Is this going to be the final year of the air raid experiment? We'll discuss all these questions and more on today's preview of the Arizona Cardinals. Let's set the stage, look back to 2020, and kind of summarize some of our key takeaways. So going into 2020, Vegas estimated wins for the Cardinals was 7.5. So not overly bullish, not overly bearish. Ended up winning 8 games. So just inched over by a half game. ATS record 7-9. So underperformed a bit. And the 7-9 is probably a little bit generous, thinking about specifically that game versus the Bills. Average margin of victory, almost a field goal. So when they won rather convincingly. Average cover +1, even though they were 7-9. So clearly when they did cover, they covered quite meaningfully. Realized strength of schedule was 15th. So again, an average middle of the road team. When we look at the chart of the market expectations for the team over the course of the season, for those who can see, this is one of the highest, consistently high barred charts that I think we've seen, where the Cardinals were pretty much bet above 20%. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks out of the season. So the market really loving the Cardinals. There was really only one bottoming out period in week 11 where they received less than 5% and they didn't cover that week. So a lot of trends for the Cardinals. It was kind of cover, failed to cover, failed to cover, cover, failed to 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 cover. Not a lot of signal I'm seeing in this. Again, like we talked about in one of our previous videos, is really for this kind of buy, sell signal strategy to really be effective. You want volatility in market expectations. Again, the market loving a team, overshooting to the upside, then losing, and then expectations getting depressed, again, and overshooting to the downside, and trying to capture, again, some of those mispricings. And when you get a team that just either the market just doesn't participate in or overly just participates in, kind of regardless of what's happening. And we kind of saw this also with the Cowboys from one of our previews, where it was just like people are just going to keep betting the Cowboys just every week, didn't matter, And when you get that kind of like market distortion, it's noise. It's hard to find signal. So when we're kind of doing our back testing and trying to figure out, where this new framework can be effective in our 2021 season, and we're really trying to filter out some of these noisier teams and trying to figure out too, because it's not like the Cardinals are a Cowboys type team. They're going to receive a tremendous amount of market support kind of structurally from a year to year basis. They're not that team. They turned out to be one of those teams last year, but that doesn't mean that they will be in 2021. So we're trying to figure out, again, a clever way to try to jump on top of that, sooner rather than later and over the course of a particular season. So you're not getting these false kind of buy and sell signals on a particular team. So still a work in progress, but we really hope to have that up and online, by those first couple of weeks of the season, so we can start to leverage that, moving forward. But anything else that you have to kind of take away from the Cardinals in 2020?
Yeah, and a qualitative observation that I think we're seeing here in the charts quantified is, it looks like when the Cardinals covered, they covered by margin. And when they did not cover, they did not cover by margin. And so there seems to be only about 3 to 5 games that the margin was under maybe like 4 to 5 points. So it seems like, the volatility in the Cardinals was when they played well, essentially, and they covered by margin. And when they lost and didn't play well, they didn't, or not necessarily lost, but lost against the spread, lost by margin as well. So maybe, and it kind of speaks to what I think we think probably the Cardinals are, which is a very inconsistent team with a lot of talent. And I think that speaks a lot to the coaching. Is, when things kind of fit nicely on a given week, the talent shows and they go well above expectation. And the exact opposite happens when the times get tough. And so, unlike a team like we did the 49ers, unlike certain other teams we've talked about, is some teams are consistent. Like even the Bears last year. The Bears were in almost every game. It was very tight. If you found your spots to bet them, they were competitive. But Cardinals, when things went bad, they went bad. When they went good, they went really good. So maybe that's the signal for 2021 is, especially from an alt line perspective, potentially, is doesn't seem like there's much point to betting the Cardinals based on the current number or the closing line. It seems like the value is when they're gonna ride off into the sunset and do well, and they're gonna do really well. And when they're not, it's gonna go in the pooper. So that's my big takeaway from last year's.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why you can see, again, they went 7-9 ATS, so under 50%, but their average cover margin was actually positive. Just going to demonstrate that, again, they covered less games than they failed to cover, but if you looked at the average cover, you'd think that they actually covered more than they lost, which just goes to show just the wide kind of spread in the volatility there.
Yeah.
And then from a qualitative perspective, again, Kyler Murray, had a very hot start to the season last year. Was a very potent fantasy player. I had him on my team. And through the first course of, the 9-10 weeks, this was a very potent offense. Then he got banged up, and then he missed a few games, also kind of down the stretch as well, which really compromised their overall ability to kind of squeak into the playoffs or not, which they failed to do. But we're in position to do. And maybe they do if Kyler Murray does stay healthy. I'm just wondering, he relies so much on his legs and the ability to move, not just move around the pocket, but actually, run. And he isn't the type of kind of like Patrick Mahomes type quarterback that he's mobile and agile to the extent that he can create extra time and space in the pocket, but he actually is running all around the field. And, for anyone not familiar with Kyler Murray, he's a small dude. Yeah, I think they say he's 5'10", 5'11". That, he's not. And man, if he takes a nasty hit, he's not just going to hurt his shoulder like he did last year. And then he was a little gimpy. The dude can suffer a serious injury. And I don't know if Kyler Murray is ever going to be the type of quarterback that you can expect to be playing, 16 games. And I'm just expecting, even if he stays healthy, kind of a catch up from defenses around his particular skill set. And again, if you remove the mobility factor from his game, I don't know if he's that great of a quarterback on a go forward basis.
Yeah, and I think,
what are your kind of thoughts
yeah,
on that?
I think last year, I don't have the specific numbers, but I think there was something along the lines of when he rushed for X number of yards, they played well and won, and when he didn't, they played poor and lost, right? So it really demonstrated how reliant the offense actually was on running the ball with Kyler Murray, which again is not a sustainable model, and it's not a Super Bowl winning model, right? So from a macro team perspective, like we see with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, is yeah, it's great when the competition's bad. It's not good when the competition's strong. And you know, to your point, especially with what I think is the biggest problem probably with this team right now is Kliff Kingsbury is, and I think the volatility kind of speaks to it, is, I mean, he wasn't a great college coach, and because he coached Patrick Mahomes and put 50 points, you know, a game up versus Big 12 defenses, he got a head coaching job. Like from the beginning, I think everyone kind of assumed like, oh, that wasn't a very good hire. But then because they got Kyler Murray, it like took the air out of that narrative. And so whether it's true or not, but it seems odd that like it's kind of like the Danny Dimes when we did the Giants, is there was this assumption that he's not very good. And then his first 3 or 4 games replacing a like dying Eli Manning was, oh wow, he's definitely better than Eli, and like he's doing big plays and he won us some games, like he's the future. And like everyone forgot that they actually initially believed he was going to suck. So it's probably somewhere in the middle, but like let's not forget that there was a point in time when Kliff Kingsbury got hired and people were like, what? Huh? Texas Tech head coach? Who's he? Like, but now it's just become this like, kind of looks like Kyle Shanahan, so maybe he is Kyle Shanahan. Like, I don't know, but is he maybe a bottom 5 coach? Right now I don't think he's top 15. That's for sure.
Well, and he's also materially changed the narrative, or he hasn't changed the narrative, but his actual play calling has deviated from what the public narrative of a Kliff Kingsbury air raid offense actually is. So in college, you know, he was having 4 wide receivers out, you know, 1 running back or no running backs, and, you know, kind of playing the deep ball. And that's what the Cardinals did do in 2019 when he first came on board. Through the first 4, 5, 6 games, it didn't work. And so then he started to change it up, and now it's almost anti-air raid. So if we go to the next slide too, and we look at that 2020 stats, I mean, what from these offensive stats suggests that they're an air raid offense? So for those who can't see, points, 14th. Okay, average. Rush percent. So how often do they rush? 8th. They're running the ball more than a majority of teams, convincingly so.
Yeah, which is probably part of the Kyler Murray running the ball thing too.
Yes,
I would assume.
Sure. But and even still, and also last year, but in addition, one thing that you can't see on these stats here though is that actually the Cardinals used 2 tight end sets, the second most in the league last year.
Yeah. And though it's not always proof, they also had the most penalties, I don't know, on an average game per basis. So that doesn't, again, that to me,
and that's probably as a consequence of Kyler Murray running around, you know, creating, you know, drawing play out, and then you either have, you know, holding penalties or, you know, what have you.
But the Ravens don't have that. You know, Seattle doesn't have that. So I think when you're the worst at something.
Well, Seattle has a bad offensive line.
Yeah. But when you're the worst at something, it suggests something's in the water. And kind of what we're talking about, the Kliff Kingsbury experiment, being the worst at penalties. I'd be curious to look back at 2019 to see how they fared and if see how this year goes, because it's indicative of a team that's not well
coached, for sure.
Coached, right?
Yes.
So, and actually, interestingly, I actually think the defense was a surprise benefit last year. And
for sure.
Offense is what was.
I mean, look at these stats on here. Look at these ranks. So I'm actually surprised by many of them.
I was surprised too when I looked at this. So
for those who can't see, give the points that given up, 12th in the league, third down conversion percent, 10th in the league, red zone scoring, 4th, pass completion percentage, 13th, sack percent, 5th, takeaways, 17th. That's pretty strong. And they only got the defense only. I mean, they lost us on Reddick. We go back when we can move on to what the changes were over the course of the offseason. I would say that the defense probably got better. So they lost Drake Kirkpatrick and Patrick Peterson. So kind of their two best corners, but that wasn't the strength of their defense. It was more so kind of the front seven. And now they've added JJ Watt into the mix. They added a first-round linebacker who a lot of people are hyped about. Their first-round linebacker from last year, Isaiah Simmons, kind of like this all-around athlete that can kind of do anything and everything. He kind of got better and better over the course of the second half of last season. So you have like a nice mix of kind of experience and youth on that defense.
Yeah.
Added Malcolm Butler again. He's probably a little bit past his prime now. Probably gonna succeed Patrick Peterson. And then adding AJ Green, I feel like is the non-factor. I think the dude is well past his prime. He's in like the Twilight Terrell Owens type years where, he's a big name and maybe he draws some extra coverage. I don't know. But I mean, he barely did anything with it. I mean, last year with the Bengals, and I feel like there's other wide receivers on this Cardinals team. Like I've seen some depth charts that list AJ Green as, wide receiver 2 alongside DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he might just be filling the Larry Fitzgerald role of old man holding down the in slants or what have you.
Yeah, but Larry Fitzgerald was remarkably resilient.
He doesn't get hurt. Yeah.
AJ Green is not.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, so it's really not much of an upgrade in the long run, I think. And that makes me think: is the offense going to be any better than it was last year? They didn't really improve overall. So it really is going to come down to, can Kliff and Kyler be a better tandem? And I think our initial kind of feel on that is, when Kyler's healthy and he's able to run the ball, this offense is very dangerous, because kind of like the Ravens, when Lamar Jackson's getting 120 yards rushing, it opens up everything else and everything becomes easier, and they can score 40 points. So I think that's probably the 2021 outlook on the Cardinals is, when is Kyler's running going to open up the offense, and when is it not? And those are the places that you look to potentially buy and sell the Cardinals. Which, if we go to the schedule,
and I think the other thing is too is they also added Colt McCoy, so add a little bit extra depth behind Kyler Murray. So if he does get injured, have a little bit more stability there. Yeah. And then also, as you see on the screen here, lost Kenyon Drake. So, that was like, they had this nice 1-2 punch with Chase Edmonds and Kenyon Drake. And now it's going to be Chase Edmonds and James Conner from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And James Conner's not really a replacement for Kenyon Drake. At least, as far as the role that you want that player to play on the team. So I don't know if that 1-2 punch is going to be as strong.
Yeah.
They also added Matt Prater. So they had some kicking issues last year. So Matt Prater getting older for sure, but he's a kicker, so maybe still has a few years left in him. And again, they're all kind of head cases. So, he's not fallen into that kind of psychological trap yet. But I missed a few kicks, and now you're just going this downward spiral, and you're going to be out of the league imminently. So if he can, I think the kicking game is one of those things that always kind of flies a little bit under the radar. Having a bad kicking game can obviously swing your season a good 1.5, 2 games for sure, over the course, on average. And so by adding, a kicker like Matt Prater, that could be also, a material upgrade. Although if they kind of, perform with the same sort of volatility as they did last year, then a field goal here, a field goal there doesn't seem like it would actually make a meaningful difference. But if they do play, a lot closer games, that could come into play.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that, and I think that's a really good point on kickers too. Is I think special teams probably doesn't get enough look when we're capping in general, like not us specifically, but general market. And it can, especially ATS, I think can come into play more often than people think. But if we look at the schedule next season with the Cardinals, Vegas has them at 8 wins. They had 8 wins last year. Playoff plus 150 yes, minus 200 no. Super Bowl plus 4,000. Estimated strength of schedule 7th. So we did the 49ers. Their strength of schedule preseason was 32nd. Cardinals is 7th. So in the toughest division probably in football, it looks like Cardinals are not going to have the easiest of paths to ascend the mountaintop, as they say. But if we look at the schedule, it starts off pretty tough. I mean, they play Titans and then Vikings. And they play what I think is going to be an underrated Jaguars team. And then the Rams, Niners, Browns. That's not an easy start to the season. I mean, obviously, if they can beat the Jags, we're bullish on the Vikings. I mean, honestly, there's a world that all those teams are playoff teams, like legit 8 to 10 win type teams.
The Jags?
I am bullish on the Jags. I think
that's incredibly bullish. That's like so off market that it's almost borderline insane.
Hey, you can't be sharp.
You could be right. Hey,
it's crazy. Well, I do real quick before we get to the Jags pod later, is I think Jags could be an Andrew Luck first season Colts situation, where he just is exactly
with a college coach. That I think that would almost be unprecedented.
But it could be the Urban Meyer is ahead of the curve, because he this is what he does though. If you know Urban Meyer's career, is his first year with teams like surprisingly really good. The next year they like win it all. Then that's the peak, and then they just crumble, and then he leaves or has health problems or makes up excuses. I don't know.
All right, so there's a little snippet of Zach's team preview for the Jags to be
Tim Tebow starting
dive into at another time.
Yeah. So back to this. The opening 5-6 games is pretty tough. Then they go to the Texans, play Packers, Niners again, Panthers, Seahawks. That's not an easy stretch. Brutal. Then they finally get their bye. Then they play the Bears, Rams, Lions, Colts, Cowboys, Seahawks. So, I mean, they have a couple gimmies technically. Texans, Lions. Okay, that's 2. Jags, maybe. Okay, that's 3. I mean, the rest of these games are very losable. It's like they're not gimmies. So they're gonna have to earn 5 games. I mean, like, which they can. It's just, I mean, it's not gonna. There's no easy pathway, barring injuries to other teams.
Mm-hmm. See, I don't know how I feel about the Titans. Mm-hmm. So I just don't. It's something I'm still.
I definitely like
crystallizing in my mind.
Yeah, I definitely like this line on the Cardinals as an underdog versus the Titans. What, over 3 points seems a little ridiculous week 1. Because again, I think the key to betting the Cardinals is probably going to start with how healthy is Kyler Murray and the game plan with him running it. And I think early in the season, he's going to be healthy. He's not going to be afraid to take off. He's going to be amped, energized. So I think that week 1 is a play on the Cardinals if I had to bet it today. Just FYI, wink, wink. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I agree. I mean, there are some pretty heavy underdogs through various games this year. Rams, Browns, Packers, Niners, Seahawks, even Cowboys.
Yeah,
that's all 3+ points.
That's a little much.
Underdogs.
And like I said, I think you have to choose your spots. But I mean, definitely taking the Cardinals and a couple of those straight ups, the ones that they match up best with, be worth it.
No, I think there's some considerable vulnerabilities for, again, when you're thinking about the variance of, in kind of the kind of one standard deviation of like how big you think a standard deviation is for a specific team. And I think that because of the Kliff Kingsbury effect, which I would say is a negative, the potential devastating injury that Kyler Murray, I feel like, is prone to getting at some point in time, plus that they got much older this offseason. And again, that could play into their benefit or the exact opposite. And so if that goes, inversely to the expectation, then you could have a really bad season, in fact, here for the Cardinals, and they easily go under 8. And I think so. Even best case scenario, beat the Titans, beat the Jags, beat the Niners, beat the Texans, beat the Panthers, split with the Seahawks, beat the Bears, beat the Lions, beat the Colts. That gets you like at 9 wins.
That's 9.
And so that's like I feel like the most bullish scenario.
Yeah.
So the most bullish scenario just gets you over, and that's if everything kind of goes according to plan.
Yeah, you're right. I think to your point, it's really an under or a no play. It's just schedule's too tough. There's too many high level variables that are not in their favor.
And again, the one place that they got some good health out of is for the most part, DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, again, if he gets banged up too, now you got some serious problems.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because he was, if memory serves, he was critical to their passing game success last year. It really, which he was with the Texans as well. He's so good that, makes life easier for a quarterback in every way.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
So I mean, again, they could be a fun team to watch. And again, if Murray's surprise is to the upside and he stays healthy, and this defense, they benefit from the experience and they provide this really cool and effective mentorship to some of these younger players that they have on the team, and everything kind of comes together, they're still going to be probably just as good as like 2 other teams in their division. So it's like so hard to separate yourselves. And I just don't know if Kliff Kingsbury is the type of coach that's going to be able to really get the best and really capitalize on every opportunity that comes available to them. So I feel like, again, maximum upside 9, maybe 10 wins. And then worst case scenario, 4 wins. I could see 4 wins. Again, if this goes haywire, then you got 3-4 wins. And that's, far under that 8.
Yeah, especially if Murray gets banged up, I think that's
So I think we're both kind of aligned. Both leaning under 8 wins for the Cardinals. So I think that wraps up today's episode on the Cardinals. Be sure to like and subscribe. Definitely check us out at SportfolioKings.com. I will be providing market-oriented research, custom market signals dashboard. Also be providing our own in-house managed portfolios where we'll be providing our kind of weekly picks and proposed allocations. So giving you insight into how we're leveraging our tools and the conclusions that we've come to. And, that's going to be something that, we're never going to charge for, because we think the value we provide is the insight, the research, the tools. That's the value we add. We think that you can be sharp enough, by leveraging that type of information to make your own picks, and we'll give you our picks for free because they're just picks. So looking forward to the season. Definitely, again, thanks for watching our videos, listening to our pods, checking out our content. We really appreciate the support, and we'll see you on the other side. And that's the closing bell.
And of course, King me.